Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Joe Ellis. I'm a commercial wedding and portrait photographer in Dallas, Texas, and today we're talking about why I chose the Fuji GFX system. Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm sure that everybody knows that every camera system that you look at is a real balancing act between the features, the size, the performance of any system. And when you go to pick a new camera, you sort of sit down, at least in my mind, what I do is pick the priorities that you have, pick the things that are the most important to you, and then look at what you need in terms of performance minimums on the rest of the scales so that you pick a camera system that meets all of your needs but prioritizes the ones that you feel are the most important. And for me, when I picked the GFX system, my primary goal was to pick a camera with the ultimate image quality. I really wanted to prioritize image quality over all other things with this new camera, because there are a few types of photographs that I take where that is really, really important to me. And so while the cameras had to have good autofocus and good shooting speed and good battery life and in-body image stabilization, those were all features that I needed the camera to have a minimum of to really make them work for me. It was image quality, the ultimate image quality, that really led me to the GFX system. And it led me there really quickly. Using this sort of metric, it was like, oh, that's an obvious choice for you. And that's why I picked the GFX100s. It also reached a price point that was way more accommodating, and I think that's also a big part of it. And I think there's tons of photographers out there now looking into the GFX system because it is coming down into a price point that makes sense for a lot of us who are in business making photographs. The next reason is that I think the future of the GFX system is really bright. I think that this sensor size and combination of features is something that's going to appeal to more and more advanced photographers as they continue to build on the lens lineup and the number of camera bodies and things moving forward. Between the rangefinder line and these S models and even the larger GFX, there's something in here for everyone. And we're reaching speeds and performances that's going to put it right in the wheelhouse of many types of photographers, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. And so it's fun to kind of get in, not early, but relatively early on this new system and really learn to push the performance of it. The last reason is that I do think that the GFX and X series combination of sensor sizes and performances is a real fun sweet spot for the type of work that I do. I think that having a crop sensor type of body and then having the GFX system is a great way to kind of work in tandem because the two cameras are good at different things. And I think it becomes real easy to choose when to use each one. So I like that combination. I think it's going to make for some beautiful images this season, and I'm really excited to get started using it. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 places where I really see the GFX camera being really instrumental in increasing the image quality of the pictures that I take. So as I kind of switch over to the computer here, I'm going to show you guys a few examples of where these types of photographs are really would really benefit from the 102 megapixels and the ultimate image quality. When you have brides and grooms, like for example, if you're a wedding photographer like I am, and you want to have them nice and small in the frame in order to show the wider context of a particular scene, that extra resolution allows you to crop for panorama, to have increased detail on the bride and groom. And these are the types of photographs that get printed by them more often than not. So I think that's also important. If they want to make something big enough to hang over their couch, for example, these photographs are perfect for that. And that increased resolution will definitely come in handy when you're trying to make those different crops and print at those larger sizes. Now, and I think it's key here to mention that it's the small faces where the 102 megapixels is really critical. Because if you're using a lower megapixel camera like a Fuji X series or an OMD camera, there's not that many pixels making up an individual face. With a 102 megapixel camera, you're using a lot more pixels per face, so you get a much sharper print in areas where you might actually notice that resolution. Here's another one, and another, and another. All of these examples of photographs I take where I have smaller people in the frame in a wider context. And then there's 2 more, and then here's an old favorite from out in California. So These are all examples not taken with GFX cameras where I would have appreciated that extra resolution, that extra dynamic range and color fidelity, and where I think that, if you're going to make a large print from this, or if you want to recrop and use these in different ways, 102 megapixels, and that ultimate file quality is really coming into its own with the GFX. Okay, the next category is large groups. And this is the exact same thing, but here's a little bit of my work, some of these group portraits I take on a regular basis. And here in Texas, we have some very large bridal parties, so I might have 10 or 12 or 14 bridesmaids or groomsmen in a lot of weddings. And in each of these instances here, you just have, again, very small faces. And this is where when you print an image, and even if it's only 24 inches wide, let's say in a wedding album, in a double spread of a wedding album, that you might want to have extra information per face. And again, like I said, here in Texas, we tend to have very large bridal parties, and then there's a couple more. So again, those are examples of when 102 megapixels does make a big difference. Of course, I have lots of landscapes I print from my personal life from lower megapixel cameras in my house, and they look fantastic. But if you have really fine detail, in a face, that is where people really will pick that out quickly. We really look at faces and images, we scrutinize faces and images, and having extra detail and resolution in those can do nothing but kind of make things better. Okay, the next category is family wall prints. And here's a couple of examples of a couple of engagement portraits and a couple of family portraits and a maternity where again, it's the same thing. I'm doing those small people in a wider context. But again, these are pictures that might actually print, 5 or 6 feet across. And instead of having to stitch photographs or, that kind of workaround, I can take single frames, and it's just easier, faster to get these kinds of images done. And you don't have any issues about things lining up or not working properly. So there's a maternity portrait and another engagement and a family portrait, all of which were printed very large or can be printed very large in their homes. Okay, details. Details is another area where I'm really excited to have 102 megapixels. Lots of times, or I would say every time I go into a ballroom for a wedding reception, I'm usually stitching photographs of an entire ballroom together in order to give a wide sweeping panorama. The problem with that is that you always get these, kind of unavoidable barrel distortions and things if you can't back up far enough from the action. So if it's a picture like this where I'm kind of elevated and I'm trying to sweep across and shoot a whole room and I don't have any more room to back up to use a longer lens, I wind up with these, slightly distorted images. But with a 102 megapixel image for each frame, I maybe can do this in just 2 pictures, and I'll get less distortion in the images. And I think that's going to be really great because oftentimes these get repurposed and recropped and printed and done different things with them, and I'm going to have a lot more flexibility there to do what I want. So whether it's a large ballroom like these images, or maybe it's even like a scene setter image like this, and all of a sudden they want to do a vertical crop, and then they want to print it large in the album, for example, then I'll be able to do that without any worry of the resolution becoming a problem. Again, more ballrooms with where a panorama stitched, and I'll be able to kind of deal with that. And then even simple details like cakes, for example, there's a lot of different ways you could crop this image, a lot of different reasons why you might want to. And again, I'm just going to have all of that extra detail, and I'll be able to share that with the florist and everything. And maybe those extra resolution images will give them extra opportunities to make marketing materials or share different ways to have the photograph online. Okay. And then the next one is bridal portraits. These are portraits of the bride, in her dress. We usually take them before the ceremony on a different day here in Texas. It's not a custom that's, practiced all around the country, but here in the South, oftentimes brides will have a separate day marked out for just taking pictures of them in their dress. And in these instances, what I would say is that it's really important to me to have really great detail in the dress. It was an expensive purchase for the bride. She picked it for a very specific reason, and she might want to see all of the beadwork or lace or whatever from the dress and really have it sing. So having the extra dynamic range from a 102 megapixel GFX file and having the extra resolution can really make for great prints. And almost every bridal portrait session ends in a large print. So whether it's something here where we're dealing with a really wide dynamic range or really intricate beadwork, or we're outside dealing with, again, bright, veils and things that really easily will go to clipping, we're going to have a lot of extra latitude in those images. Or really high contrast scenes like this one, where we are really pushing both the shadows and highlights, and I'd like to be able to decide how exactly I want those to fall after the fact. And then again, black and white's an old favorite of mine. A lot of detail in this dress, a lot of contrast, and I really wanted to push the brightness of the wall as far as I possibly could. This one's a little bit easier. This is in shade, so we're not going to have that high dynamic range, but again, a very detailed dress. And then here, I'm actually pushing the strobe off of a wall to give that nice highlight. But there's a lot of detail in her face and in the beadwork and lace on her veil. So all of those instances there where we're heading for a large print, where we really want to showcase a gown with a lot of intricate detail on it, a bridal portrait is a perfect place to use a medium format camera with 102 megapixels. And then, two bonuses for you, because I'm still kind of getting over this, and that is high ISO. I love doing pictures with stars and at night, for example, and there's going to be instances here where I'm going to be able to push this camera and shoot stars and things like that and really have a lot of extra dynamic range and an extra detail in the sky. So whether it's a star images like this one, or I'm opening the shutter and doing these long exposures for something crazy like this lightning picture, or I'm working late at night and I only want to use the available light from these chandeliers. All of those are instances where we're going to push the ISO, and oftentimes that would mean when I'm shooting with my phase that I would have to switch back to my other camera system because it simply couldn't handle it. And that goes double for the fact that it didn't have an image stabilizer, so I'm already maybe working at a shutter speed where I feel like the phase wouldn't be able to give me a sharp photo, or I wouldn't be able to hold it long enough to get a sharp photo. And I don't really want to carry around tripods and all that yik yak when I'm working at a wedding. Things are already very fast paced on a wedding day, and you have maybe 2 minutes to run outside and make this photo. You don't want to have to spend part of that time setting things up. So that is high ISO. And then high contrast is another one. So just a couple of quick photos here. These obviously have already been toned to give me the contrast that I want. But the beautiful thing here is that you can shoot pictures with the GFX, I'm finding, and because of the increased dynamic range and ability to lift the shadows, you can decide some of these factors afterwards. And or you can save little things that might be stuff that you miss on the day. Like, for example, her veil in this image is very, very close to blowing out. And I might have missed that on a wedding day, and maybe it just clipped. So instead of having to go in and make an edit on that for a final picture that's going to be printed or used in a wedding album, I'll be able to simply do a recovery on it. So those are like 6 or 7, I guess 7 different times when I feel like the GFX is going to have a really positive impact on the quality of the pictures that I'm making at a wedding. Now, of course, I'm going to be shooting the smaller format cameras for lots of other things on the wedding day, and the speed of the smaller format and the weight of the smaller format and like those kinds of things is going to be necessary to get through an entire wedding at this point. But I feel like the GFX is going to have that place in my bag that's going to be critical because I really want to spend time maximizing my image quality. And I think in comparison to anything else on the market, that it exceeds my expectations for what's important to me, and it meets my expectations for everything else. So that's why I chose the Fuji GFX system. I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. If anybody else is shooting this thing for weddings, I would love to hear from you. And you can hit me up in any channel that makes sense. If you want to email or come over Instagram, or you want to just use the comments here on YouTube. I would love to know more about the community of people using GFX cameras for weddings. And if you guys have questions about any of it, just hit me up in the comments. Talk to you all in the next one.